Well, thank you to everyone for coming. We're about to begin. If I can have your attention, please. My name is David Rosenthal. We are the Manalapan Jewish Connection. We run inspirational Jewish programming in the area. We would like to thank our sponsors for tonight. And we have a list. We run programs, different classes. We have weekly classes in the area. If you saw on your way in, there was a sheet with our classes and with our programs. So we have a weekly class in Parsha. We have one in Jewish ethics, Jewish philosophy. And if you're interested in joining a class, starting a class, if there's something about Judaism you'd like to study, or you want to learn one-on-one with somebody, you can please approach myself or Rabbi Jacoby, and we'd be more than happy to start something. Each of us was created with a soul. The purpose of a soul is to get close to Hashem, to get close to God. When we're on earth, the way we do that is by performing mitzvahs, by doing the commandments in the Torah. But when someone passes away, they're no longer able to perform mitzvahs to get close to Hashem. But one way that their soul, even after they pass on, is to get close to God, is when their children do mitzvahs and when their children study Torah. So in that vein, we want to thank the Zagha family, not Zagha, the Zagha family, for sponsoring tonight's event in memory of Eli and Beatrice Zagha, that we come together to learn about God's creation. And the Rambam writes that, Maimonides writes, that the way to come to loving God is to learn about their creation. So it's a tremendous merit for Maurice's parents' souls, that their souls should get closer to Hashem, that we came together tonight and that he sponsored tonight's program. So we would like to ask Maurice to say a few words about his parents.
Thank you. So thank you all for coming. Nice turnout in honor and memory of my parents, and I guess in honor of me and who my wife and I have become in the shul. On that note, about my parents, so both are first generation Americans, born in the 1919, 1924 time frame, grew up in difficult times, but persevered and continued on, bought a house, had 4 children. I'm the youngest of the 4. The thing about my parents was, like many of us grew up with, was education. To continue and go on and become successful through education. My father, in particular, started me very young with how I ended up where I am, teaching me like I break a piece of glass because I didn't want to stay home with my aunt, so I broke the glass. He yelled at me. He then said, "Okay, let's go fix it." So I learned how to cut glass when I was like 4, and using tools and becoming self-sufficient, guiding me through scouting program. The reason, and my mother, I was the first brownie, and my really long-term friend Sharon Bowen is here. I was a brownie mascot in my mother's brownie troop. The point of my conversation regarding where it started, where I was a mascot in the brownies and a Boy Scout until I was 18, continued through my adult life. My parents taught me a very good lesson, and that's to volunteer. So through my life, not only through scouting and through all the things that I've done with them as they took me to their volunteer position, I was the volunteer as well. We worked at, they took me along. I put decorations up for New Year's Eve in the synagogue in Brooklyn. We went to a new synagogue because my grandfather was upset with that one. We put decorations up the next year in that synagogue. I did flea markets with them. And it's not just me, because my wife and her family have the same thing. they also were involved, and that's probably one of the things that drew me to Barbara. But my parents, so, you know, through growing up, involvement in synagogues, involvement in the scouting program, involvement in other civic areas. And I guess they taught me a good lesson, because that's where I am. So, in memory of my parents, I thank them for guiding me appropriately. And here we are tonight. Thank you, Dr. Presby, for presenting a wonderful program. I'm looking forward to it. I've heard much about it. And with that, I hope you all enjoy the evening, and thank you for being here in support of my Eli and Beatrice Zagha, Eliyahu ben Moshe, and Rebecca ben Moshe. Thank you.
Now we're ready for our lecture. Dr. Herman Presby is a world-renowned scientist who specializes in photonics. He received his bachelor's and PhD degrees with honors in physics from Yeshiva University. He was a research scientist at Columbia University and an assistant professor of physics at the Belfer Graduate School of Science of Yeshiva University, doing research on high-energy plasmas in the form of relativistic electron beams and high-power laser systems, which I'm sure we're all very familiar with. Dr. Presby joined Bell Labs in 1972, where he was a distinguished member of technical staff. He was appointed manager of the Photonics Applications Research and Development Group at Lucent in 1998. In this capacity, he's led several key photonics programs. Among them is the research effort in free space optical transmission, where he's responsible for many of the record-breaking innovations in the field, which have earned him the Business Communication Systems President's Award for Team Excellence. He's the originator of new ideas and programs in ultra-high-speed data transmission, optical cryptography, optical key generation, planar waveguide amplifiers, and fiber radiation studies. Yeah, as are we all. Dr. Presby has published more than 180 papers in scholarly technical journals, is the editor of one book, and has some 200 U.S. and foreign patents granted and applied for. Dr. Presby is a fellow of the Optical Society of America and has contributed his expertise in photonics and patents throughout Lucent, the government, at Terabeam, and now as a consultant. Dr. Presby lives in Highland Park, New Jersey, where he delivers classes on various Torah topics, from Talmud to Bible to prayer and Jewish law. He speaks widely on topics about science and religion, and we are honored to call on Dr. Presby.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much. Let me just get a feel. Did anyone understand that little write-up about me? I didn't. Let me just expand a little bit. You know, in the professional world, I'm a physicist, and my own specialty, as you heard, is photonics. Photonics means light. And as part of that, my subspecialty, which turned out to be my major effort, was in an area called optical fibers, fiber optics, and sort of one of the originators of the items in that field. If you don't know what fiber optics is, you can stick around later, and we can discuss how your phone calls get sent around the world on wires made out of glass by pulses of light. Just an amazing, amazing technology. But we're not going to talk about fibers tonight. We're going to talk about something else, which is of interest to me, and I hope you'll find it very interesting. It's an area of science. It's an area that really has scientists puzzled. We're going to look at God's hand in the world, in nature. We're going to look at a very important statement that in our prayers we say 3 times a day. And that is the statement that is up here, which reads, Poseach es yadecha. Literally, it means Poseach, you open up your hand. And literally, it means, God, you open up your hand and you provide for all living creatures. And when we say that, most people have in mind, well, God, you know what? You provide the food for all living creatures. But what we're going to see is that it's a lot more than that. It's not just that God provides the food, and I hope you're enjoying the food that God's provided tonight, but God has also provided the means of acquisition of the food and the means of processing that food. And what we're going to do, as far as time and your interest allows, is to go through a few dozen examples in nature of this phenomena. And I hope you'll bear and enjoy, some of these items. So let's move on. There's only one slide in Hebrew, and that's just in case you're familiar with Hebrew a little bit. We're going to run through that very, very quickly. Essentially, what that slide says is that the importance of that statement of God opening his hands is so fundamental that in our prayers it requires great concentration. And if one does not really focus on that, one should really repeat it over and over. Let's look at the food supply of some creatures and where they get it from. What's this guy eating? Yeah, where did he get it from? Yeah, wherever he got it from. Let's look at a few more just to warm up with creatures being provided with their food needs. This guy's having a wonderful time, and that guy's having an even better time, with dessert. And another strawberry eater and watermelon eaters. Where'd they all get it from? Where'd that food appear? And they love the ice cream. And if you like pizza, so does he. So somehow creatures get their food, but not quite along the lines that you're looking at. Let's start very simply with some very simple creatures in the form of plants. How smart do you think plants are? Very. You're right. Yeah, you're right. They're very, very smart. Let's look at one example of a plant and its nutrients. You know what you're looking at? A Venus flytrap. Why is it called a Venus flytrap? It traps. Well, very good. Yeah, among other items. And very interesting. Let's see how this guy works. If we look at the leaves, they look quite interesting. You see these spikes at the ends. Let's look at one in a bit more detail. Here's a leaf. And if you notice, there are some spikes sticking up here in the center. There are 3 of them. It turns out if 2 of them get touched simultaneously, that leaf will close. And what's it going to close on? That poor creature that happened to walk into that leaf. And here's one that is walking in there, and the leaf is going to close, and there he is. Now, what's going to happen? Well, he's not a happy camper, but what's going to happen is that leaf is going to exude some chemicals that are going to test that bug and say, hey, do you have what it takes to give me my nutrients? And it's then going to exude more chemicals that are actually going to digest that bug, and it's going to extract all of the nutrients that that bug has to offer in terms of protein. But that's very interesting because where do plants usually get their energy from? The sun, by a process called, you are a very educated audience. But this guy is getting items that he cannot get that way from the insect world. Isn't that interesting? Now, what's so interesting is, how did this plant, this Venus flytrap, know that there were even such things as flies? And how did he know that he could get what he needed out of insects? And then how did he develop that mechanism to extract what he needed from them? And how did he develop that mechanism to trap these guys? And on and on and on. What's the answer to all those questions?
By accident.
Oh, by accident? Oh, well, you haven't taken biology lately. So if we were in a biology class and that question was asked, what's the professor looking for? What's the answer? Evolution. Yeah, evolution. Yeah, it just had to have been. But now, when you think about it, you say, gee, how did that really ever take place? Let's look at what happens after this guy enjoys his. There are some pictures you may not want to look at, especially if you're still eating. He'll drop that carcass and then wait for the very next fly to come along. There's another plant that can do the same thing. This is a sundew plant. Notice what appears on the end of these spikes. What does it look like? Yeah, little balls, but those are actually little glue balls, and they're very aromatic. And what do you think those aromatic glue balls do? They attract insects, and if an insect comes along, that insect is going to get stuck, and guess what the plant is going to do? The very same thing. It's going to digest that insect and get its protein out of it, get its nutrients, and live happily ever after. But again, how did this plant know about the insects? How did it know it could get its protein from those insects? And how did it develop this very sophisticated way of trapping those insects? Something to think about. There's one other plant. There are 3 plants in the world that actually live on insects. This is a third. What does it look like? A pitcher, and therefore it's appropriately named a pitcher plant. And guess what happens? This has a very seductive liquid at the bottom, and insects that come along smell that and wind up going down, but they have a very hard time getting back out because of the structure of the spikes here. And so they fall down to the bottom, they take in all of the nectar that they like, but then they discover that they're gradually disappearing and the plant is eating them for their nutrients. And again, a smart pitcher plant, a smart fungi plant, and that Venus flytrap as well. So the development of these processes within these plants is nothing short of surprising and quite amazing and very, very hard to explain from scientific principles. Let's move on from plants, now that we know how smart plants can be, to the insect world. What are you looking at? A bee. What do bees do? They make honey. And what do they make that honey from? From pollen. From pollen. How do they do that? How do they do that? How do they gather that pollen? So let's take a little look here at a bee which is gathering pollen from this plant. Have you ever seen pollen? Sure, you've probably brushed up against plants and you got this yellow stuff on you and you try to clean it off and it only makes it worse. And yeah, that's pollen. But what is that pollen? And how does that bee collect it? How does he collect it? Does he walk around with a handbag and stick that pollen in? How does he pick up that pollen? Something to think about. Well, yeah, let's see what he does. It turns out this is what a grain of pollen looks like. It's a scanning electron microscope photo of a grain of pollen. This is a few microns in diameter, but notice the structure of pollen. These are these little yellow items that you see. There are millions of these items that go into that yellow mess that gets onto your clothing as you brush into it. But notice the structure here. There are these indents. And let's look at a few more grains of pollen. 10 microns, by the way. Are you familiar with microns? Okay, good. A micron is a millionth of a meter. So a meter, a millionth of that. If you squeeze your fingers together, you're not even getting 1 micron. You know, a micron is a millionth of that. It's really, 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 really teeny. So this is 10 microns. And notice a similar structure of indents and protrusions on the pollen grain. And here's some more, just to indicate a very similar structure. And guess what? That bee has the inverse structure on his legs. He has little spikes and what have you that fit into these holes. And he then is able to pick these up as he goes from flower to flower, getting that pollen. Clever? Clever? How did the bee know the structure of pollen? That he should get this structure on his legs and to be able to pick it up and to transfer it then to his place to make honey out of it. Clever bees, very clever bees. What do scientists say? Try evolution. Yeah, that really, that really does it. Here's an interesting little insect. This is a beetle that lives in a desert somewhere. What do you see on his back? Bumps. This guy got bumps. He lives in a desert where the rainfall is practically non-existent. But we know every creature needs rain, needs water in order to live. How's he going to get water in order to survive? And he has an amazing mechanism to do so. And what he has, these bumps actually attract the water. What he does in the Namib Desert where he lives, he's known as the Namib Desert Beetle, he stands up in the morning fog. There's a little bit of fog that rolls over the desert, and that fog has just the teeniest bit of moisture in it. As that moisture rolls over his back, and he has to stand at the right angle. He's very smart. He can calculate that angle exactly. And if he stands at that right angle, that fog is going to condense a little bit on those bumps. And water is going to gather, and it's going to roll off those bumps and right down into his mouth. It's an amazing, amazing process. And he gets all the water that he needs from just that little bit of fog in the morning. It's an amazing process. Micro bumps. You are probably wearing an article of clothing now that has micro bumps on it. Did you ever see a tablecloth? You may have a Shabbos tablecloth where you may have spilled wine. And what happens when you spill the wine? You say, oh no, what are we going to do? Oh, another glass of wine on the tablecloth. But then you see it's beating up. Did you ever see that? Yep. And why? How's that happening? Oh, you may have a blouse or a shirt where you can put water on it, and you see it beats up and it runs off. You know why? You know why? You know why? They've learned from this Namib beetle to put micro bumps on that material. And those micro bumps cause that water to beat up and just to run off the material. Just an amazing example of science learning from the ultimate scientists who put these developments into nature itself. But where did the beetle get it from? The beetle, here's the material. If you want to test out, you have water, something on the table, just pour it over your shirt, and you can see if it works or not. The beetle learned this, or another place where this exists, and the only other place is in this the leaf of this flower. Do you know what type of flower this is? It's a lotus blossom. And if you look at the leaves of a lotus blossom, they're always dry, or they have beads of water on them. And the reason is that the leaves also have micro bumps on them. And it's those bumps that cause the water to beat up into balls. They roll off, and not only do they roll off, but they pick up all the dirt that was there on the leaf as they roll off the leaf. A very nice development, and one that science has made great use of. But that beetle has made great use of it to get his necessary water supply in order to live. So again, an example of Hosea Chesed, that God provided this means for this creature to get the water to survive. Let's move on to an unfriendly insect. You know who he is? A mosquito. Do they have mosquitoes in Marlborough? No. So what do mosquitoes eat? What's their food supply? Blood. And it's the female mosquitoes that do it. And let's take a look at it. And how do they do it? How do they get that? How do they get that food supply? Here's one that's in the process of filling up. Again, you may not want to look at some of these pictures coming up, but here he is filling up, and let's look at him really filled. This is better than a Chinese meal, for the mosquito. But the amazing thing is, how does he find your blood vessel in order to get that blood out of you? Not so simple. Did you ever have blood taken in a doctor's office or somewhere? Was it a pleasant procedure? Not at all. Not at all. Plus, I once had blood taken, and the nurse was there, and she said, gee, I'm not getting anywhere. Let me try your other arm. And she tried my other arm, and nothing came out. And she said, maybe you want to come back. I said, no, I'm not coming back. I said, maybe you want to get the doctor in here, which she did, and he was successful in extracting that red liquid from it. It's not a pleasant procedure, but this mosquito is an expert at doing it. Now, anyone interested in becoming a multi-billionaire, if you could develop a machine that would automatically take blood, what would that be worth? You walk into the doctor's office and, oh, hey, just stick your arm in here, and a clamp comes down, goes up, done, bye. Every hospital would have hundreds of these. Every doctor's office would have a few. Why not? Mosquitoes do it, and they do it instantly. If that mosquito took his time in finding your blood, what would you do? Smack him, and that's what you do. He doesn't have time. He got to get down there and discover that blood. And how does he do it? Well, he has a nice proboscis that he sticks in, and it's a very sophisticated item. In fact, it's composed of several styluses that are there for a very interesting reason. Did you ever get a paper cut, a teeny cut? How long do you bleed? No, it coagulates right away. Blood coagulates. What keeps that blood from coagulating in this tiny hole that the mosquito makes? You would expect it to coagulate so quickly and block that supply that the mosquito would not be able to get his drink. You know what he does? He injects with one of these other styluses an anticoagulant into you. And that anticoagulant keeps your blood flowing so he can get his meal. Yes, and in fact, when you get an itch after that mosquito leaves, that itch is from that anticoagulant that he injected into you. Yeah. Now tell me, just think about it, but don't think too long. How did that mosquito know about anticoagulants? And that blood could clot, and that he should inject that in order to get his meal? Not bad. And how did he develop this whole mechanism to do it? And how? It's just an amazing development of our Creator to provide that food supply for this insect. Here's again a scanning electron microscope detail of that proboscis that gets inserted. It's a very sophisticated item, and he does it so very, very quickly, and he's off. If you ever got bitten, there are things that you can do. We could spend time on this, but you're not going to get bitten. So just look very quickly. You can do everything from rub yourself with a banana peel to a slice of onion to blah, 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 blah. So there are things you can do, but again, you're doing this for that anticoagulant that the mosquito left within you. Okay, let's move on. What are we looking at? A spider web. Why does a spider make a web? To catch his dinner, to catch his food. And an interesting item. Picture, how would you make a web? How would you make a spider? If you were a spider, think like a spider. It's a real engineering feat. Now here he is hanging on a branch, and now how do you do it? You have to drop a perpendicular, and then how do you get across? How do you start this thing going? It's not so simple, and in fact, it's a real sophisticated piece of engineering to make that web. How did this guy learn to do it? Where did he learn? School, right? Yeah. I went to school. Web making 101. And you graduate with web making 303, but this guy is good at being able to make that web. And again, he does it to get his food supply. Here's one in the process. Again, there are spiders that actually make webs. This is called a web casting spider. He makes his web and actually casts it on an insect and traps the insect. He doesn't wait for the insect to come along. He will cast it and trap the insect in it, as you see happening over here. It's a little scary, but close your eyes and keep eating. but this guy is really good. Is good at it. The mechanism to make those webs is extremely sophisticated. We did some work on this as we were developing fiber optics. We don't get our fiber optics from spiders, but we learned a lot from spiders. They make a material that is extremely strong. It's an amazing, amazing material. And how do they make it? How do they make it? These are the glands on the underside of the spider that are actually exuding that web material, spider silk. It's absolutely a sophisticated, amazing system. How did he know how to do that in order to build those webs that he had to go to school to learn to do? Not bad. To get his food supply. Again, a poseach esyodecha. God opens his hands and provides for every creature in amazing, amazing ways. Let's move on from spiders. There are spiders that live under the water and actually build a air bubble that they breathe, and then they go out from that bubble, hunt their prey in the water. There's not much competition underwater for insects, and they do very well. They come back into their bubble and eat. Here's a very sophisticated guy. This is a scorpion. The scorpion turns out to be a perfect hunter. A perfect hunter. And how does he do it? If you look very closely, on each of, you notice he has 8 legs. On each of his legs, there's a very sensitive cell phone receiver. You see that, Nokia? Okay. Those receivers are tuned to subharmonic frequencies. In other words, if there's a bug that's coming along, where do scorpions live? In the desert. In the desert. How many bugs are there in the desert? If you were a bug, would you rather live in Miami Beach or in the desert? So there's not much there. This guy has to be good at getting his food. And here's what he does. That bug is crawling along and making vibrations in the sand. Those vibrations get picked up by those receivers at the tip of his legs and get transmitted to his brain. How big do you think his brain is? About the size of this red dot. And the time of arrival of those waves is different for each leg. It gets, say, if he's coming from this direction, it gets here first, then here, here, and then here, 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 here. That brain calculates the trajectory of that bug that's walking, and he knows exactly where that bug is going to be. He walks over, waits for the bug to get to a particular spot, picks him up, and has his meal for a week. He never, never misses. An amazing, amazing creature. Let's not look at what he's eating. The next guy, who is also absolutely amazing, is a butterfly. What type of butterfly is this? A monarch. Just, they do so many amazing things. I think you know about their flight every year, their migration. Where do they migrate from? They'll go from Canada to Mexico. Some of these travel like 6,000 miles. And it's not even the same butterfly that makes the whole trip. One will stop and take a break, lay some eggs, and those eggs hatch and continue that trip. How do they know where to go? Just an amazing, and then return back up to Canada. Just amazing, amazing stuff. But what do they eat? What do they eat along the way? They eat nectar. They eat nectar. Where is that nectar located? It's located at the base of flowers. But how do they get their head down to eat that nectar at the base of flowers? Well, they don't. They have a nice long proboscis, a nice long tongue that goes down, and they suck up that nectar. It's an amazing item that they have. Let's take a look at it. So here's one on the flower, getting his nectar. Here's his tongue. Notice the length of that tongue. If we had a tongue equal to that length, we would have a tongue 15 feet long. Now, what would you do with it? Don't think about it. Don't think about it. But that is the proportion of the tongue of these guys. And there are some guys that that proportion goes even bigger. What would you do as you walk along? You'd roll it up. And that's exactly what the butterfly does. He rolls up that proboscis and flies, and when he gets to a flower where he wants to get his meal, he extends it and drinks that nectar. Not bad. Where did he get it from? Upstairs. Here's again a scanning electron microscope photo of that proboscis. Here's a guy, a hawk moth, with a slightly longer tongue, equivalent for us of about 25 feet of tongue. And if that's not long enough, how's this guy? Just amazing that he's getting the nectar from a flower while he's hovering above it. There are long tongues in the world. Don't practice, but you know there are guys that are good to get their food with sticky tongues, and they get insects off of leaves and what have you. Hey, did you ever see a snake? Hopefully in the zoo. And what's that snake always doing? Sticking out his tongue. Why is he doing that? He's smelling. Yeah. And what's the mechanism of doing that? Well, it's again a very, very sophisticated mechanism. That split tongue actually picks up molecules, single molecules of food that's somewhere. So, for example, your meal tonight, that Chinese food, molecules of that food are wafting throughout Marlborough. Don't think about it. There are single molecules that are out there and that are being picked up by insects and by garden snakes that are out there. There are probably some in the hole now, headed this way. How do they do it? Well, a single molecule gets picked up, and as he moves that tongue back into his mouth, he has an amazing organ in his head called the Jacobson organ that can detect and identify single molecules. And it tells that guy, Chinese food ahead, and just keep going and you'll get there. And he keeps sniffing till he actually winds up at his food supply. This organ is so sophisticated. Have you ever flown lately? Of course. Did you ever get stopped for a little bit of a extensive investigation, and they swabbed your carry-on? Why are they doing that? Well, they're looking, of course, for those explosives, that you're suspiciously carrying. But what do they do with that swab? They stick that into a machine, and that machine detects items that are infinitely less sensitive than this organ. In other words, this is another business venture. If you could develop an instrument the size of this organ to detect single molecules, you would have it made. You would be able to, again, have every airport at your beck and call in terms of getting that little item that you would just have out there, and as people pass by, you'd be able to tell everything about them in terms of what they just ate for lunch and what spray they used that morning, and what have you. This guy can do it with that organ. Who developed that organ? Right. I hope you get the answers right, to this, because this biology class doesn't last forever. So here it is. Again, as that tongue comes in, it transfers those molecules to that Jacobson organ for detection in his brain. There's another creature that has that same organ. It's a Komodo dragon. He's a little bit bigger. You don't want to meet these guys. But again, he also smells with his tongue and finds his food that way. You know what you're looking at? Again, somebody you don't want to meet in the water. How does he find his food? And he has many, many mechanisms to do it. I just want to focus on one of them. He has everything from seeing, smelling, hearing, skin, all sorts of things. But one of them is one of the most amazing items in existence, and that is an organ of Lorenzini. An organ of Lorenzini is something that can detect electrical fields. And if he is in on the attack for a fish, some prey, those fish are struggling, they give off a little bit of electricity, a little bit of electric fields. This organ is so sensitive that if there were a 1.5 volt battery, all of the batteries that you use in all of your devices, where one end was stuck into the New York harbor, and the other end, you need a long wire, stuck into a harbor in Miami, the shark could tell you there's a 1.5 volt battery in the ocean. That is how sensitive it is. It is more sensitive than any electrical measuring piece of equipment that exists in the most sophisticated laboratories. How did this guy develop that item? Just the most amazing, amazing thing. We were at an aquarium once. We have kids living in Cleveland, and they opened a new aquarium. They had a shark exhibit, and they had a sharkologist there. I'm not sure that's quite his name, but they had an expert in sharks, and he was talking about sharks. I went to speak with him, and I asked him, I said, hey, do you know about this organ of Lorenzini? He said, sure, of course. He said, would you like to see it? I said, I certainly would. He said, let's go up to the shark tank. And he said, let's wait till one of those big ones comes by. And as this big shark came by, he pointed out these little holes in the snout of the shark, and he said, those are the openings for this organ. And I said, do you know, naively, how sensitive that organ is? He said, it's very, very, very sensitive. I said, how did he do it? How did he develop that organ? He said, well, that was, wasn't that evolution? Oh, I said, you're not pronouncing it right. He said, that's the way. I said, you mean to tell me that somehow he was able to develop an item that's more sophisticated than the most sophisticated voltmeters that now exist in laboratories? How did he do it? He said, gee, I'll have to think about that. I said, happy thinking. One other creature has that type of organ, the platypus. You know what? Creatures not only get their food, but they have to live long enough to eat their food. And there's a whole process, a whole technique called camouflage. Camouflage. So let's just look at, we'll quickly run through a few camouflage examples. This guy is a giveaway, right? What do you see? Yeah, you see his eye. Let's look at a few more and see if you can pick out some of these guys. This turns out to be a beetle, but that beetle looks exactly like a bit of bird dropping. You don't want to see bird dropping, especially on your clothing or head or what have you, but this beetle made himself look like a bird dropping, even to the point of having what looks like undigested seeds within him. And a bird flies along, sees this beetle, and says, I'm not eating him. There's no bird that wants to eat bird droppings, and he moves on, and this guy makes it. How did this guy know what bird droppings look like to make himself look like that? What do you see on this butterfly? Eyes, and they are darn good, even to the point of highlights on those eyes. Where are the real eyes on this butterfly? In his head. They are teeny. Why does he have such big eyes? You bet. A bird comes along, sees this big creature, says, I'm not going to eat him. This guy is big. And he flies off. And there are butterflies that have amazing, amazing eyes, as we'll see a little bit more. This is a real live fish creature. Notice the appendages coming out of his body. They make him look just like a green tree living there under the water, and he hides away nicely. Here is a leaf beetle. This is his body. His body looks exactly like the leaves in the tree that he's living amongst. Is that amazing? Or amazing? Or amazing? Yeah. How did he know what those leaves look like? And how did he make himself look like them? He's only to be done in by this owl that looks exactly like the tree that he's living in, or this moth that has real-looking eyes, or this guy that has really scary eyes, right? His real eyes are in his head, and they're absolutely teeny. This is the rear end of a beetle that looks just like a snake, and the bird does not like snakes, so he comes along, and this beetle gets away with looking like a snake. How did he know to do that? He had to live long enough to get his food. Here's another leaf beetle. This is his body that looks just like the leaves that he's living amongst. Can you find this guy? Well, it's a giveaway, right? You see his eye, but if you didn't see that eye, there he is. He looks just like the moss that he's living amongst, that little frog. Another owl living in his tree, right? See him? And this guy is absolutely amazing. He's or she on her nest looks exactly like the bark of the tree that she lives among. Yeah, it's an amazing thing. If you stop and think, how long would it take for me to stand here to look like this background? A week? It's not going to be. It's not going to be. And yet, here it is. Here it is. How do they know to do that? This is an amazing guy. If you want to get more food, you better do it now before we look at this guy. This is an egg-eating snake. His food supply are eggs. But how does he do it? This would be the equivalent of us swallowing a turkey. Now, can you picture doing that? How would you do it? Would someone like to try? Can I get a volunteer? No volunteer? What would you have to do to swallow a turkey? Yeah, you know what you'd have to do? You would have to detach your jaw, drop your jaw down to your mid-range, and then stuff the turkey in. And that's just what this guy does. He detaches his jaw, gets that egg in, and here it is, going in, that detached jaw, and here it is on the way in. What's going to happen next? Yeah, I don't want to spoil your appetite, but maybe this will give you one. It just keeps going, and here it is. And then there are some prongs in there that break that egg. How do you think that feels? Really good. Yeah, that really feels good. You know, it's like swallowing. Do you ever eat chillin'? You know, it's like swallowing a whole pot of chillin', you know, at once. And this guy does it in an amazing way. And again, he has that mechanism that allows him to eat whole eggs. Here's an interesting fish. He wants to catch an insect on that leaf, but did you ever see a spoon in water or a cup of tea or a straw? It looks bent, right? That's because the light waves are refracting between the water and between air. So actually, he sees the insect here, but it really is here because of the bending of that light. And he does the calculation to spritz and get it just in the right spot, not where it looks like it is. Birds have beaks that are ideally suited for the food that they eat. They were designed for eating and eating specific food. I'm going to run through very quickly, and you can just see what birds eat. What does this guy eat? What does this guy eat? And this guy? I'm going to have to give you some more hints. Let's look at some food that some of these guys eat. This guy's easy. What does he eat? Have you ever seen a hummingbird? Why is he called a hummingbird? He hums, you bet. He's moving those wings at hundreds of times a second. Amazing. And he can stay motionless while he gets his nectar out of those flowers. Yeah, this guy's a good hunter. And this guy's a fisherman. They all get their food with specifically defined beaks. Here's an amazing creature, a woodpecker. What does he do? Why is he called a woodpecker? He pecks wood. Why does he peck wood? To get insects, and those insects are in the bark. Now, let me ask you something. How did he knocks his head? You probably heard woodpeckers, right? Knock, 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 knock. Yeah. That's not a nice thing. Someone has to volunteer for this. Who wants to be a woodpecker?
Very loud on metal siding.
You want to come up? Come on up.
It's very, very loud on metal siding.
Come up a second. Come on up. Come on up. You can be our woodpecker. Hey, there we go. Okay. Everybody knows Maurice, right? Maurice is going to be a woodpecker. Now, Maurice loves his position as being president of the shul. And he wants to continue, but we're going to do something to Maurice to make him really want that position. Maurice, you're going to be a woodpecker. Now, the woodpecker, we have to find a hard wall. That's too soft. Oh, this is good. Okay. But not yet. Maurice is going to bang his head against the wall as fast as he can with your encouragement. And he should be able to do it like 5-10 times a second. Yeah. And did you just? And as he does does so, but there are no insects, hopefully, here. But this is just what a woodpecker does. Maurice, do you want to sign with the release? What would happen? What would happen to Maurice's brain if he did that? It's perfect for school presidents. Yeah, right. But it's not going to be too healthy. But now, what happens to that woodpecker brain? Why doesn't he knock his brain out as he picks? He's smart enough. Right. Okay, so why doesn't he? Why doesn't his brain? Why does his brain get fried in knocking his head? And you know why? This guy has a spring. He has springs in his neck, absorbers that actually absorb that shock. Shock absorbers. Did you ever ride in the car? Nowadays, you don't see it, but as I grew up, just a few years ago, and there were cars that weren't made as well as cars now. You can have a car without good shock absorbers. How did that ride? Not well. But he has shock absorbers there that absorb that shock, and he can bang away without harming his brain. Something every shul president needs, right? Just a little insulation to keep you healthy in that position. And Maurice is doing a great job as shul president. Okay, eyes. We can go through. Eyes are absolutely amazing creatures. That hunt with their eyes. A gecko that has two eyes that can face in any direction, both front, both back, one in each direction. There are creatures that have 8 eyes, a spider with 8 eyes. An eagle can see with his eyes a rabbit at 3 miles away. To get 3 miles to get his food. Just absolutely amazing. Here's another business opportunity. This is a gecko. What can a gecko do? Sell insurance, right? Now, this gecko, to get his food, has the amazing ability to walk up walls. He can walk over ceilings, walk down here, and get some Chinese food. How does he do that? So everybody thinks what? Suction cups. Do you have what holds your phone in your car? Do you have a suction cup holder there? And did you ever try to remove it if it's on real tight? You have a tough time. You have to pry that off. If this guy had suction cups on his feet, no way would he be able to do what he does. And not only that, try a suction cup on a wall like this. It's not going to stick. It's hard enough getting it to stick on your car windshield. Just have a little curvature. It's not going to stick there. A little rough surface. It's not going to stick. How does this guy do it? And this has really befuddled scientists for a very long time. But it is such a worthwhile item because if you could develop a sticky tape that would stick to anything, you have it made. Scotch tape, how big is the Scotch tape business? Big. What about gecko tape? Gecko tape would stick to concrete, would stick to your driveway, would stick to this wall. What would it be worth? Big. As big as that blood machine. This is big. Let's see how to do it. How does he do it? And you know how he does it? If you look at his legs, there are no suction cups. What you see are millions of spatula sticky items. They're not sticky, but what they are these spatula stalks, and these stalks actually provide electrical contact to the surface that he's walking on. What's happening is that the electrons at the tip of these stalks are making electrical contact with the material in the wall, and that is what is holding him to the wall. And that's what enables him to walk upside down on the ceiling and down the other side. Absolutely amazing. There are laboratories around the world that's trying to reproduce this through nanotechnology, and guess how far they've gotten? Nowhere. They cannot do it, but the payoff is huge. If you could come up with a way to make gecko tape, you've got this shul supported forever. It is, it's billions. It would be absolutely billions. But again, no one's been able to do it yet. All it needs is a really good idea to make that gecko tape. Now, 1 second. The gecko did it. How did he do it? How was he able to do it? Did he have a laboratory? How did he do it?
He was born.
He was
Born
with it, yeah. And what about his mommy and daddy? Where did they get it from? Yeah, and where did they get it from? And where did they get it from? Again, we've got to think about these things. Here's a common creature, a squirrel. Did you ever see a squirrel go up a tree? Down a tree? Of course. Did you ever see a pussycat go up a tree? Did you ever see him go down a tree? No. You got to call the fire department, right? That little book that you read to your kids. And why do pussycats, why don't they go up trees? Because they can't go down trees. What allows a squirrel to do it? That squirrel has the ability to turn his rear legs 180 degrees. As you're sitting there, you can try it. You can't do it. Don't do it. He can turn his rear legs around so that as he comes down, they are grabbing on. A pussycat can't do it. A pussycat's rear legs would face forward, and as he tried to come down, he would just fall down. So he doesn't even bother going up. What does the squirrel go up trees? What does he get up there? Nuts. He gets his nuts. Okay, let's move a little bit. Here's the sense of smell is phenomenal. The fox can smell things deep under the ground. A kiwi can do the same. Bats, legendary. Sonar can locate their prey by giving off acoustic signals, bouncing off the prey, and locating them and locating their paths. A giraffe can bend down, stand up without passing out. Did you ever bend down quickly and get up? You feel a little dizzy. This guy can do it at his great height, and he doesn't pass out. What allows him to do that? He has special valves in his neck that equalize the blood pressure so that he doesn't pass out. How did he develop that? Right. And here he is standing up. Here's an amazing guy. The season's over, but this guy can walk on water. And there was someone else that claimed he could walk on water. But why does this guy walk on water? He gets his food. He gets his food at the other end of the pond. And he's good at walking on water. Don't try it. Don't try it. And here's another guy doing it. You have to be very determined. There's a secret for doing it, but these guys haven't let out what it is yet. And it's an amazing, amazing process that they were given this ability by our Creator to enable them to get their food supply. A whale, how much food do you think a whale has to eat? A lot. Yeah, but I'm a physicist, so you have to quantify a lot, and a lot translates into a lot. a lot. This guy, but if he gulps all of those krill, which are teeny little creatures there, he's also going to gulp tons of water. He doesn't want that water. He wants to just keep that food and get rid of the water. What does he do? He has a sieve that's in there, and that water comes out, and the food stays behind. How did he develop that? Right. Okay, we're just about at the end. This is a creature that I've said, if this doesn't convince one of a grand designer and of a creator, one is hopeless. And that's a strong term, but I think every one of these examples is an example towards seeing the hand of God in the world in ways that science can't even explain, other than with trivial stories. It just had to be, otherwise they wouldn't have gotten their food. They had to have developed this. But tell me how? How could any of these things have ever come about, no matter what the time scale is for those items? Absolutely impossible. But this creature is a single-celled organism. Remember that micron? How small is a micron? Teeny. Your hair is like 100 microns in diameter. So 100 of these can fit on the width of your hair. Notice what you see within this creature, what look like little balls. Let me show you another creature of the same type. Here they are. Here's 200 nanometers, 0.2 microns. These balls are magnetic material. They're magnetic balls. And you know what it does? They are sensitive to the magnetic field of planet Earth. I think you know we have a magnetic field around our planet. It's what protects us from the emissions from the sun. It's what makes that compass always point north. This guy locates his food relative to the magnetic field of planet Earth and relocates it when he swims away and can come back to that food supply. That's absolutely, it leaves you speechless when you see something like this. How did he get those magnetic particles to locate his food supply? Huh? Huh? You still in the biology class or have you graduated? Okay, finally, and we'll end with this. Migration is just amazing. I just want to end with one example of migration. The Arctic tern. The Arctic tern, again, for food, migrates from the North Pole to the South Pole every year. It's a distance of 12,500 miles. Unbelievable, unbelievable. Some people complain about getting to shul, getting to synagogue on Shabbos. You know, someone walks 2 miles. Over 12,000 miles to migrate, again, for food. Just absolutely. And how does he find it? And how does he know where he's going and what have you? One of the miracles and wonders of nature. So, as you sit back and enjoy your food, hey, you know it's coming, and you know that the provider, the ultimate provider, is there working for you and providing that food that's going to be there. So all you have to do is come dressed at the table and just wait for it to be delivered. That is our Hosea Chesed. We thank God for opening His hand and providing for us. Thank you. Okay, I think we can take like half an hour or so for questions. Now we'll just take one question. Let's start in the back, and then that's it. Yes.
One, is evolution still going on in the natural world, including humans? And
Is that a question or a statement?
no, it's supposed to be, is evolution still going on?
No. But that will take us for another talk, and if you have another hour, we can go into a discussion of evolution, and it's a major item. Looking at the evidence for evolution from a scientific perspective is a major question. The bottom line is there certainly are changes that are taking place in the world, taking place in creatures. Those changes are adaptations. They are a response to the environment. What we are seeing and learning is that our DNA, the item that makes us what we are, makes every creature what it is so phenomenally powerful and so rich that it can adapt and actually change the nature of creatures in order to accommodate their environment. This is not evolution, this is adaptation. There is no evidence for evolution at this macroscopic scale. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
I have more, it's not a question, it's just a request.
Yes.
I'm going to call upon your experience in fiber optics.
Excellent. Yes.
The request is, can you fiber optically
Yes.
create for us an apparatus
Yes.
that can take the place in 22 days? We're going to need a candle and a feather. Can you create something fiber optically that we can walk around with? You want to make money? Yes, sir.
No, I think that's, that's one of those things where you really want to carry on the tradition. Let me tell you why. Why it's a wonderful tradition to hold that feather and to hold that candle. And the reason is the following. Our sages tell us, based on a verse in Scripture, that Ki nishmas adam. I'll say it in Hebrew first. That let me say it in English second. Or I'll say it all together. That the soul of man is like the candle of God. In other words, that our candle is the candle that we use is symbolic of looking into our soul. And the process that we're going to go through in picking up those breadcrumbs in 3 weeks from now is a process of soul searching. If one goes around just picking up breadcrumbs, one has missed the essential message of what Passover is. Passover is a time of freedom, a time to free oneself, to free one's heart, to free one's mind from all of the items that are just cluttering us up, and to truly look into oneself and look into one's relationship with God and say, you know what, I'm cleaning it out. And I want to reestablish a wonderful, good, clean relationship. And that candle is symbolic of God looking within me and looking at my soul and my heart to see how well I'm doing in this cleaning process.
Thank you.
I have a funny question, but serious. Do any of the flytraps or animals that are searching for their own food get indigestion?
You know what? That's such a good point. You know, it is such a good point. And in fact, that is what has led to the various diets that we see. In other words, you will not see an insect eating Chinese food, and you're not going to see caterpillars and butterflies eating sushi. In other words, they're smart enough. They know exactly what they can handle. And God forbid if they eat something out of the realm of what they should be, it immediately reacts negatively with them. It's not called indigestion. It's called, let's get rid of this as quickly as we can. And they really stick very, very strongly and religiously to their diet. They're all kosher and kosher to the nth degree.
So if an erroneous bug goes into a flower that only eats this type of bug,
correct. It will be rejected. It will be rejected.
Yeah, it's an excellent lesson, God, for biologists.
Thank you.
Now we get to human body with lots of genomes, lots of how many molecules do we have there?
We have no. In our body, scientists estimate that we have 100 trillion cells.
Okay. So here's my question. So now we're looking at machine learning. We're trying to look at all this data, billions of data, and find a pattern.
Yes.
So in order to do machine learning, we use mathematics. So the question is, was God also a mathematician?
Wonderful. Wonderful. Did you hear that question? The question was, is God a mathematician? Is God a mathematician? God is...
Machine learning is mathematics.
You bet. God is the most sophisticated mathematician one can find. But if you think about it just a little bit, it doesn't take much. The fact that we can describe the world, you can sit down. The fact that we can describe the world with mathematics is nothing short of amazing. It is a gift from God to us that mathematics works, and it works in describing and defining the world. There's no reason that it should, and yet it does. God is the most brilliant mathematician.
Thank you.
And thank you for your point.
That's machine learning.
You got it. You got it.
That's the future.
Yeah. Yes. Whoops.
I'm so impressed with your presentation, and I feel that our children, or my children that are outside of Hebrew Day School or Jewish learning, are getting the evolution is what they're taught.
Yes.
And so I'm asking if your program today would be an ideal thing, at least for me individually, but I think for many of us in this room, to pass on to our grandchildren.
100%.
So how do we do that?
How do we do that? I'm working on a book that you can buy. Please go on when it's done. And I hope to have something like this in it that will be a video that you can then pass on. So that just helps, inspires me to work a little harder on getting that out. Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
If there's no evidence for evolution, why do you think so many people believe and argue.
You know what? That is such, did you hear that question? It is so fundamental, and we could spend such a long time on that. The question was, if there really is no scientific evidence for evolution, how come it is so universally believed, and it's something that is so propagated? And the answer is, when I speak at universities quite a bit, and I'll speak to professors and what have you, and I never discuss things except from a scientific perspective. And generally, the professors that I'll meet, it's not even a match. I have over 200 patents and 180 publications, and I say, let's talk science to science. And I'll appear with a yarmulke, and they know that I'm an Orthodox Jew, and they expect me to speak from a religious perspective, and they don't hear one word of religion. They hear science, and they're stunned. I say, let's look from a scientific perspective, and let's look at the evidence that's there, and it's not there. It's not there, and they don't have what to answer. And in fact, the comeback really is, we just accept it. Why? Because what's the alternative? And when you think of the alternative, to them the alternative is recognizing God, recognizing the hand behind everything that we just saw. And when one recognizes that, one recognizes that there's a power above us that would like to see us relate to him, and would like to see us lead our lives in the way that he tells us is best for us. And you know what? People don't like to be told what to do. They want to do whatever they want to do, and not what an even higher power that knows what's best for us would like us to do. So people deny the existence of that power because they don't want to be held responsible for acting in ways contrary to the will of that supreme being, to the will of God. And that's why evolution is promoted and propagated, just to remove that degree of responsibility from individuals and from their feelings. Okay, we could go on all night. Yeah.
So there's a question we talk about scientists. Do scientists believe in God? Albert Einstein was one of the premier scientists,
You bet.
and he said God doesn't play dice with the world, which I think a lot of people misunderstand that.
Yes.
And that dice, meaning there's 6 sides, and there's an equal chance of 1/6 for everything. That's maximum randomness. And he's saying the world is not random.
Correct. Einstein was religious in his own way. In his own way, he recognized God. He recognized that no way could we have a world, and especially with items like this, without a creator. In fact, the greatest of scientists were always religious, always recognized God, from Newton on down. It was only lately, into the mid-1800s, when a fellow called Darwin came along, and he said, well, you know what? It looks like items are designed. It looks like there's a creator for this, but I can explain it. And I can explain it in a way that's called evolution. But again, when you look at it from hardcore science, it does not hold water. And it's a very, very difficult path to take. But again, when you look at scientists, in fact, some very famous ones, have you heard of Watson and Crick? They got the Nobel Prize for DNA. And Professor Crick was asked, hey, where did it come from? Where did DNA come from? And he said, it's impossible for something, this complex molecule that has all the information to make a human being to ever have come through this process of evolution. He said, absolutely impossible. So I said, well, where did it come from? He said, it came from outer space. Something called panspermia. It came from aliens. Aliens brought it here. Now, this is a Nobel Prize winner. Now, you're talking to Professor Crick. What would you say? Where did the aliens get it from? And what would his answer be? Other aliens. And where did they get it from? Other aliens. And where did they get it from? Other aliens. It's aliens all the way down, all the way up, and all the way down. This is how far scientists have gone to deny and not to open their eyes to the truth of what science itself is demonstrating. It's quite a phenomenon. I think we're going, I don't know. I'm willing. Should we keep going? Yes.
Okay, my question is, if I phrase it correctly, that it seems that
many centers, dinosaurs are dismissed as they never happened, yet they're scientific.
Absolutely.
And they found bones.
Absolutely. There certainly are dinosaurs. To dismiss dinosaurs and say they never existed is just not correct. It's why, because unfortunately a true understanding and a proper understanding of science is not always presented in the way that it should. And a lot of it is based on IGNORANCE, and unfortunately.
That seems to be in some religious schools.
Unfortunately. It's unfortunate. I speak in religious schools, and in fact, I give a talk on dinosaurs. And I let it be known, what a proper perspective on dinosaurs should be. Absolutely. Okay, are we? Yes. Good. And they, yes, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, you know what? I think. Yes.
Different animals don't exist anywhere else.
Correct.
There are also animals in Australia was disconnected.
Correct.
That means there might be some kind of evolution in the animals because they move forward.
It's called adaptation. It's called adaptation, not evolution. Okay, folks. Thank you.
That they should, shouldn't they? That they should. You're right. Nice meeting you.
How old am I? And how old do you think?
He's young.
You're close.
But close?
Very close.
I'm 91.
Eine hurry. Don't be well and gesund. Gesund. Yeah, good.